Caravan. You've injected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, not what you don't.
The Morning Show. Tony Caravan with you. With a little bit of nutmeg in a Diet Cola drink. Actually, one of the brand names. I used to understand that actually was the ingredient in one of the major colas, but I can't be sure of that.
Good morning.
So anyway, I'm only half dressed today. I don't have my other shirt on. My good buddy Tattoo sent me a few sound clips. He's the master of that sort of thing. And I thought we would take a look at some of those. If they did indeed, I tried transferring them over. I don't know if they. Let's see. Here we go.
Did you accidentally inject yourself with some kind of psychotropic agent?
Oh yeah, they're here. Anyway.
I fear no evil.
I fear no evil. And that's the thing. Can't be afraid of these people. I had a graphic that I was going to use for the title card today, and I decided against it. It's just kind of my face and, the palms. And I don't know if that, I haven't just done that in a while because I've been making all these custom title cards, and I actually made one today, and I have no way of really showing it to you because I literally would have to print it out and hold it up on a sheet of paper. Ridiculous when you think about it. But that particular one, let me look at it again. I made it yesterday. I try to make these kinds of things in advance. It says corporatocracy entrance only, and it's got a red carpet, and those, metal poles with the felt, covered chain things. Whatever. Anyway, so this show is available will be linked later on Locals. And I spoke about that in yesterday's program. And obviously, if you're on Locals hearing this now, that makes no sense whatsoever since you're watching it on Locals or via Locals. And so, yeah, we have a community set up over there. And I will be putting together in the coming weeks some exclusive content. What I'm going to do, the plan is, because I've been wanting to do this for a long time, I'm going to sift through the literally close to 200 videos I have. And like I said, there's close to 60, if this isn't the 60th, consecutive live 2-hour broadcast. I mean, think about that. I mean, it's a everyday live for 2 hours. But I mean, over the past, I think I'm over 200, close to 200 videos overall when you combine everything. And so I want to particularly over the past, say, 2 months, there have been some really good moments in these, like I call this one a flow of consciousness. I'll read the description to you in case you're watching this on your television. I watch YouTube on my television, so you don't have the option to see things like descriptions and that sort of thing. At least on mine, you don't. So the description said, first of all, it's Flow of Consciousness Part 5, and I think it's Part 5. Life isn't that complex. We basically respond to stimuli in the environment that surrounds us. There are only so many things we can do. The question is, will you remain influenced by, and a product of your environment, or break free of the shackles of conformity and pursue your dreams unencumbered by those who want to control you. And those who want to control you are what I refer to as the corporatocracy. Some people call it the Davos set, World Economic Forum, the people pushing the Great Reset, that sort of thing. The powers that be, if you want to. Big tech / big data, big pharma, all the war profiteers, the ones Eisenhower called the military industrial complex, big ag, and the various bureaucrats. Of course, the Fed and the central banking system that, creates money out of thin air. Basically, it's just a ledger in the clouds, and they're really up to something right now, trying to they're really pushing for this cashless type of society. Excuse me if that sounded like I was slurping or something. It's just there's a lot of ice cubes in this thing. I want to get it while it's cold in this instance. And yes, that is the official morning show with Tony C. But as I alluded to yesterday, because I wasn't entirely sure, I have some Bitcoin. Now, when I say some Bitcoin, I mean a fraction of it. But the Bitcoin's up to $60,000 now. So that fraction of mine is actually, is no longer fractional. It's actually in dollars. But like I say, we're talking next to nothing. But, if you had 20 Bitcoins or something like that, I mean, right? 10 Bitcoins would be $600,000. So 20, if you had 20 when at 10,000, which, you basically made $1 million, from the price going from 10,000 to 60, right? Isn't that right? Something like that. I may be wrong mathematically there, but I mean, just off the top of my head, you made a lot of money. So whether or not this is going to stay that high or not, I don't know. I mean, the Fed's talking about blockchain. It's the whole talk of the central banks and the financial community, because the reason they want a cashless society, it's not as if the monetary system already isn't we don't already have what's called a fiat currency, meaning that it's really not backed by anything. So, I mean, we got off the gold standard, back in the early part of the previous century, and silver, we stopped using silver in our coinage and having any of that bearable, silver certificates bearable to, or what was the line? Payable to the bearer upon demand. It used to be on the bottom of a dollar bill in silver or something like that. And that was in the 70s when that went away. They stopped putting silver completely in coins by the late 60s. But I think it was 64 or something was the last silver quarter or silver dime. But I believe there were still remnants of a very minuscule amount for the following year or two. I may be wrong about that as well. But the idea is you're not getting paid in gold and silver, and it's a piece of paper. And I always give this example to people, how perception is reality and the way people perceive money. During the second Iraq War, there's my cat just looking over at me. Can't understand who I'm talking to. After the second Iraq War, when Iraq was pretty much bombed to smithereens, And, there was more or less a ceasefire there, the calm after the storm, Desert Storm. They reopened I think they call them bazaars. That's the marketplace where they sell stuff. So the bazaars reopened. And in the course of this whole thing, even though, Saddam Hussein was toppled, right? And the country basically no longer existed. I mean, I was totally against that, just as a side note. They didn't have weapons of mass destruction. And even if they did, there was a whole effort of going on between inspectors and stuff. There was just a rush to insanity. But what I'm trying to get at is that people went out, these bazaars opened, stores or what have you, and people were trading with the currency from a country that basically no longer existed. And basically, I believe had, Saddam Hussein's head on it, face on it, like it would be Washington or whatever. So people perceived that paper to have a value. And so people were buying whatever, with it. And that's the whole concept. And those in the financial industry figured this out a long time ago. And this may seem controversial to people who are constantly going up and worried about the budget, the balanced budget folks, particularly libertarians. I mean, I'm a libertarian thinker, but like I said, I'm no political, devotee of any party. Okay. I mean, liberty to me in the sense of freedom. So you could say liberalism, liberty, libertarian. I like if there's the word freedom in there, fine, but I'm not a liberal in that sense, and I'm not a libertarian in this sense. I'm Democrat, Republican, red, blue. I just don't do that. I don't play that game anymore. I try to be my own man, make up my own mind on specific, on whatever the issue may be. I don't want to, just be a member of some group and be lumped into an ideology that they conform to. And there have been times in my life when I've been left-leaning and right-leaning, back and forth over the years. It just happens. I mentioned that in a previous video. But anyway, libertarians particularly, and I'm not criticizing individuals, and this isn't a political discussion. This is a monetary discussion. Oftentimes, and they go crazy about balancing the budget and spend, deficit spending. You hear all this stuff all the time. Well, the thing is, basically the Federal Reserve is a consortium of private banks, big private banks, and they have a series of Federal Reserve, facilities located around the U.S. And there are central banks in Europe and whatnot. In fact, everything goes through the Federal Reserve System. I mean, it has nothing to do, I think everyone now knows that Federal Reserve is not the federal government. It's private. But some people, I think, still don't know that. So what happens is, when you use your ATM card, for example, that's the part of the Federal Reserve System. In other words, everything goes, works through this, through them. And, without getting into some kind of, economic discussion here, which I'm going to get over this real quick, is the Federal Reserve loans money to the banks, like overnight. The banks pay it back, that's how, they control the interest rates. They buy treasuries. That's why it's very interesting. You got Janet Yellen, a former Fed chair, who's now the Treasury Secretary. So it's like, that revolving door is just totally, exposed. It's like when you had, his name is Pompeo, who was a CIA guy who then became the head of state, state Secretary of State. Now, for decades, for many decades, everyone knew that CIA operated out of, embassies, just like, the spies. We just expelled a couple of years ago Chinese spies out of embassy in Texas. Remember, there was this, I don't know if you saw the scene, they were burning all their documents and stuff. The Russian spies were expelled out of, I think, in DC embassy. This goes on all the time. They always were the spy centers, but none of this stuff was ever talked openly, right? So I actually thought it was, when you see the Fed chair, now Treasury Secretary, or when you saw a CIA director actually become the Secretary of State, it's like, okay, you guys are so confident now, it's just out in the open, right? There's no more games being played. And those in the background who are trying to play those games or say, the woo-woo people like, oh, that's conspiracy theory talk or blah, blah, blah. It's like, enough is enough. It's like it's like they tried to deny the Great Reset had anything to do with Davos and the World Economic Forum until people started to go to the actual website, and there it was in big bold letters, the Great Reset, and Klaus, who's right out of early 20th century, evil dictator type of character, a support character, is talking this talk. It's like when you hear Bill Gates talk about depopulation, and I know that might offend some people, but it's like, I'm not into the cult of personality. That's one thing you'll find about me for new viewers. There's too much of that. That's how we got where we are now, is because of this cult of personality. And that's what's empowered the corporatocracy, as I call it, which is comprised of big tech and big pharma and all those other litanies of big this, big that, contractors, etc., big media. That's how we got to this place, because of the cult of personality. Now, when I say that, some people just look from their vantage point, their ideology or their political party, and they'll point to a particular person on the left or the right and say, yeah, you're right. They have a cult of personality around that guy, right? No. It's around all those guys and gals. That's the problem. We have cult of personality around people who are in the media. And like I said, a cult of personality around, we elevate people, just people. We're all just people. And somewhere along the line, we've been conditioned through the education system, through the media, through entertainment, right? Or directly by, intentionally through, propaganda, I mean, propaganda is nothing more, is the same as like advertising, you know? So whether it's a political campaign or they're selling potato chips or soft drinks, that's all a form of propaganda. It's an indoctrination or I mean, so we're conditioned in a certain way. And that's part of what in my description, what I'm trying to allude to there is that you have to break free of those shackles. And the first step is to be aware of it. In any time there's anything that you're caught up in, or you know, if you're if somebody's like not aware of that something's going on, you have to make them aware of it. Now, that's not to say that the average person's going to accept that. People are pretty thick-headed, and then they have that cognitive dissonance. And I realize that, phrase is way overused these days. But, there's certain things. It's like what you'll hear if you follow me in these videos. There's a lot of repetitive phrases I use because, like I said, life isn't that complex. Humans aren't that complex. And the issues facing us today are the same issues. There's a dozen or so issues, and that's about it. The rest of the stuff is pretty petty. But there's probably a good dozen serious issues that people on all sides, of the political persuasions, have just can't be reasoned with about. They will not accept the other, an alternative, or that, like I'm saying, that certain things are actually reality. The nutmeg does improve the drink. It's hard to describe. It just adds a little bit of, I don't know, less sweetness. I'm drinking a diet drink. I'm not going to mention the brand, but it's a major brand. And, well, first of all, those things are no good for you, but I don't know. I do different things however I feel in the morning. Sometimes I just want a cold drink, and I go back from coffee to this. And then some homemade concoctions I'll make sometimes, just blending a few things. But so, back to the budget. I'll always circle back. And I'll never leave you hanging. And if I miss something today, I'll get it to you tomorrow. And in fact, yesterday when I was having that talk about how the school administrators mess with the minds of kids, I think the campaign was Danger Stranger. I thought about that in the middle of the night. I want to double check that. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I say I'll never leave you hanging. The idea or warning that all strangers can potentially be dangerous. It's an example of a moral panic that people experienced. Do not trust strangers. Do not talk to strangers. Do not walk with strangers. And the idea was what I was at, and I'm going to get back to the budget thing in a second, but I didn't know, I couldn't think of the exact name. Was that the so-called school administrators, they created this program, this campaign. And while true, all those things are true, and children should be taught to avoid, strangers. What they failed to do is they put such a focus on the danger stranger that they didn't enforce the idea or get the idea into the minds of children that if there's some guy walking a dog and approaches you and says, "Here, do you want to help me walk my dog or walk?" That's dangerous too, and you should avoid that. And so kids were basically smiling faces, or somebody that's a face they've seen in the park before that wasn't a stranger, so to speak, and then you were having abductions. I just wanted to finish that. And that's the way I work here. Like I say, when you're doing something live, you're doing it every day. You're rambling, you're half out of breath because you're talking so fast. Sometimes you miss a word, but if I don't get back to it, circle back during this broadcast of a specific thing, I will catch you the next day. 99.99% of the time. So let's circle back to the budget now. So these strict budget people that say, now I'm against wasting $2 trillion, to, just the government paying $2 trillion out. That's basically just going to their friends, or, these are political payments, right? Or rewards for ineptitude. Like in the recent bill that was passed, there was just a lot of, and last year and the year before and 10 years before that and 20 years before that. This isn't like one party. They pretend it is, but they all got their, what they used to call pork and special interests and political interests, right? I mean, that's what pork is. Basically, it's like doing something in a district so that a congressman could go back and say, see what I did? I put that bridge we needed in, or I got that building, or we brought that, I refurbished that downtown art center, or the park. And many of these things people say on the surface, oh, well, that's fine and dandy. But the argument is it's taxpayer money, and it's in bills that are like, 1,200 pages or 5,000 pages. And these things are just stuck in there at the last minute, or things are pushed in by special interests. So something that will benefit a company. It's like a foundation, how foundations sometimes launder money. What they do is the foundation collects this money as these 501c3 type of operations. By the way, the CDC is a 501c3 corporation. People don't know that. They think that's like the Fed too. It's not. Okay. So what happens is you've got these foundations. They raise billions of dollars. The heads of them, okay, they seem like they're great philanthropists. So then they will give, say, $100 million to a project somewhere, donation. And there'll be this media event, and it'll be covered on television, local news, whatever they've done. And, applause to this great humanitarian, this great philanthropist, this great foundation. End of story for us. But what we don't know is that the company or the NGO or whatever who received that, grant, whatever, is tied into the board or the ownership or the members of the foundation itself. And they are going to purchase something that those individuals who in the foundation have a financial interest in. And so in effect, it's a kind of a money laundering scheme. And it ends up being a profitable venture. And I've seen many studies of this, of specific instances. And you can research that if you really want to, but you got to go down the rabbit hole on that because it's like one of the best kept secrets around. That's how foundations work. These super foundations, the big ones. I'm not saying every foundation and every charity or anything like that. No, it's not. That's not, I'm generalizing, but I'm talking about some of the major player ones. They're scams, basically. And so people have this cult of personality about some great philanthropist, but they have no idea that they've just figured out a scheme to make profit. So it's just a way of not paying, it's another way of avoiding taxes, And that's why they always say the wealthy don't pay their fair share of taxes. So, excuse me. So in the budget system, so that's part of like when you see this now that we're into the $1 trillion spending, we've that glass ceiling has been broken. Hundreds of billions. That wasn't enough. So now in recent years it's trillions now. But where do these trillions of dollars come from? They don't come from the Treasury. Right? I mean, it's just like the foundations have their schemes. It's not like A to B to C. Aha, caught you. No, they're not that. They're a scheme. It's like I try to explain about governments and agencies and bureaucracies. A lot of these are run like organized crime syndicates. And people take offense to that, right? Because no, my brother-in-law works for such and such, and he's a stand-up guy. Well, it probably is, but it's an organized crime syndicate. And what that means is that the people in charge, the key players and certain others are up to no good. It doesn't mean that, if I say this, our government is an organized crime syndicate. I don't know how many people there are, but, let's just do it. The beauty of live and being on the internet is let's just go to it. How many people work for federal government? And they're breaking it down by states. If I can get it's so hard to see. They just want to hide this stuff. Okay, here we go. The federal government employs nearly 9.1 million workers, comprising nearly 6% of total employment in the United States. That includes nearly 2 million federal employees, 4 million contract employees, 1.2 million grant employees. Those are the interesting ones. See, and 1.3 active military. So the military is not even a bit, and more than 500,000 postal employees. So if you take out the military and postal workers, you're talking about, over 7 million bureaucrats, right? But 9 million overall. And I don't know. And you know how they count these things. Or you don't know. We don't know. Like I say, you don't know what you don't know. So it could be upwards of, especially with they just spent $2 trillion. And they're talking about spending a couple trillion more. You could end up with 10 million people somehow employed by the government. That's a lot of people, and that's a lot of money. But trillions of dollars go out. The Treasury Department, that's not coming out of our taxes. They create these T-bills, various financial mechanisms in which they, work money like through banks and through Wall Street. It's kind of how we got into that financial debacle in 2008, which we still really technically haven't even recovered from. It's, figures lie and liars figure, and it's just financial people, accountants, big accounting firms, and the Fed and the central banks and Treasury just all playing around with numbers. And that's all part of when I say the corporatocracy. You see, and they have their tentacles in what used to be. That's why I also call this the former United States, not just because, we have irreconcilable differences, and anyone who's in denial of that, well, you're just in denial, right? Because that red state, blue state, okay, within families, this is the same old Tony Caravan stuff you hear all the time, but I'm going to jackhammer it in your head, show after show, because there is no comeback from that. This isn't my opinion, right? We have irreconcilable differences. There's nothing that ever will. We do not live in the United States of America, At best, we live in the disunited States of America. And we have some, depending on your vantage point, your viewpoint, we have some authoritarian states, and we have some, less authoritarian states, and we have some states that are just glossed over, nobody really pays much attention to, right? But to deny that that it's a night and day difference from the governance of California to the governance of Texas, or the governance of New York to the governance of Florida, say, right? Is just, is utter nonsense. And this has nothing to do with from a political standpoint, meaning like I'm saying one or the other, is better than the other, this, that, the other. I'm saying that's like a marriage gone bad. That's irreconcilable differences. Abbott and Newsom are like night and day. It's just the way it is from every standpoint. Ideologically, there is no common ground there. So, and you could go state by state like that. And so that's when I say the former United States, that's that. We have irreconcilable differences. Western civilization is all but collapsed. And the United States, the U.S., the American empire, so to speak, is a corporatocracy. It's just not there. And those that hang on to these things, that we were, if you're older, that we were taught, and and read the things the founding fathers said, think of Federalist Papers, all the documentation written around and about the Constitution. That stuff's being ignored. The courts don't even stand up for the Constitution anymore. They're politicized. They're political appointees who have loyalty, for the most part, to the party that appointed them. Justice is not blind. And again, this is a generalization, of course. You know, there are great judges out there. Just it's the same with law enforcement and all that. You know, whenever you see some kind of, event that happens, you don't lump everybody into it. Okay. But back to the budget. So it's all about they're trying to create and this is open. This isn't like you're hearing it for the first time here. This is just, but I hope not. Like I say, I cut the cord to TV. So this is TV to me. That's why I like this idea of locals, and, and I've always watched like the Rubin Report, for example. I watch people who have long form discussions on through YouTube mainly as my primary source, right? Because I don't want a soundbite. I don't want a teaser line, some clickbait headline, or a video clip, and then stay tuned after the car commercial or pharmaceutical commercial, so then you may or may not get the rest of the story, the true story. I just don't go for that. I don't like commercials. I don't like commercials to begin with. And I was in the advertising business. Yeah, it's pretty funny. So yeah, you watch these long form things like this. Now, of course, I don't put myself in the league with professional broadcasters, who do this for a living, because I don't make a living at this. I mean, I was a professional broadcaster at one point in my life, but I mean, not a national professional broadcaster. And the nature of my presentations are, our flow of consciousness for the most part. And they're also just like kind of fun, like just the idea of, going through, getting these things sent to me. I have a pretty good sound collection, but not as good as tattoos.
Can we use the network to transmit a message?
Yeah, we can use the network to transmit a message. That's for sure.
The station for more fun in the sun. Fun Radio.
It was getting a little too dry and a little too somber there for a while. So the budget thing doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters and it doesn't matter at the same time. Okay, because it's not really coming out of their goal is a paperless, paper money, to eliminate paper money altogether. And I guess you've probably heard of the coin shortage. So I don't know if that's intentional, if they've been like systematically pulling back coinage or not, but whatever the case may be. And the reason being is they want to create some kind of blockchain technology and just have money in the cloud. But it already is, like I say, the Federal Reserve, it's already just a ledger in the cloud. They're just moving, figures from this column to this column. It's like, the cloud is the best explanation. It's like when you have a computer and, depending on your computer, on your smartphone, you could be working on something with a certain app. And then when you go home, or you say, and you have your laptop or you have a desktop like I have here, that whatever I was using on my smartphone, I can pick up where I left off right on my desktop, or if I have a laptop or whatever, tablet. Because while I'm working, all that information is in the cloud. Just like people, their photos, or you have access to everything. I mean, unless you're set up to not. There'll come a time when you won't even have the option to not, have everything in the cloud. That's the other move with all kinds of data. That's the goal of big data, is to have everything accessible by the corporatocracy. And the more the corporatocracy takes over what used to be government, and that's what I was trying to get at when I was looking up the numbers of how many people work, for the government employed. And though I was leaving out like postal workers and the military, because, soldiers and people delivering the mail, I see differently than, basically people working in Langley or Quantico or, wherever. But they all work for the corporatocracy now. They're not working for elected officials. And that's why having the cult of personality and this whole idea of politics is pop culture, and you go to, Twitter, Facebook, I guess, like I said, I have accounts on those platforms, but I just use them as secondary places to repost my videos. That's it. Just so to expand the network, so to speak. I'm no longer, tweeting or posting, or replying or anything like that. Because it's just too much, they're too diametrically opposed to one another, the groups, the factions on those platforms. And, and some people could say, well, this particular platform definitely leans, in this direction and this, that, the other, which you can make a case for that. But what bothers me about it is not so much, the fact that I think they're in violation of several amendments and, freedom of speech, and, and that the FCC at any given time could walk in and just say, this, what is it? Section 203 or whatever, and just say, well, that, we're going to override that. But they won't, because it's a corporatocracy, and the FCC is controlled by the corporatocracy. And big media is the same as big tech, is big data and big ag and big pharma and the military industrial complex and the Federal Reserve System. Right? And so they all come up and comprise the corporatocracy, and elections now have become, just theatrical events, feel good events for people who have strong feelings and have who are part of the cult of personality of the candidate that they support. It bothers people, I know, when I say that, but it's the truth. It's not like I haven't, like I said, I've gone back and forth over the years growing up, but I'm retired now. And, like I said, and I've written all these books. I mean, you could tell by, haven't shown this book, one of my book covers in a while, but this kind of sums it up. My life is a surrealistic nightmare. There's an old picture of me. That's actually me broadcasting when I was younger. And of course, the iconic thing coming through the wall there. Let's see what year this is. I forget. When you do like 10 books, it's like you don't even remember which. This was 2016. So we're talking 5 years ago. My life is a surrealistic nightmare. Some of the contents in here. The orchestrated fall of man, the dehumanization of man. Humans are insane. Social media is an excuse to avoid being social. The future came and most people missed it. My life is a surrealistic nightmare. 6 reasons why you might be brainwashed. And then, of course, I also put in things like live to be 250. And I used to always include things. See, in these books, in this era, I've changed since then. I'd always have like, these are my quotes. Not all my books are, are great, but they're not that expensive and they're available on Amazon for like anywhere between $9 and $12 or something. I always recommend getting a print book, digital books. I don't know. It's just not the same. And the way I do it, graphically, you miss that if you have on the Apple Books or on a Kindle, because they kind of distort the way the pages flow and stuff. And I self-publish these books, and and so it's my complete design. I design the covers, I design typography and the layouts and all that. And I also do my own editing. So inevitably, just like these broadcasts and like my over 50 beat poetry tracks, they're not perfect. And that's why I always say this. I like doing this live because I'm going to, it's human. So I will inevitably have missed a typo in here, or there'll be, 2 thes in a row because spell checker doesn't check for that kind of a thing or something. And no matter how many times you read it, but that's okay. Some people say, oh, it's like the people when I used to be on Twitter. I say I don't do it that way anymore. Part of if somebody couldn't like put you, like couldn't fight your argument, like couldn't come up with an argument against what you presented, they would criticize you and say there was an extra he had like an extra space, or he didn't put a period at the end. Well, what does that have to do with what I was trying to say? So in other words, you're saying my tweet was wrong because I had an extra space somewhere? Yeah, it's a world gone mad. It's pretty crazy. It can be a surrealistic nightmare sometimes. It seemed that way. I don't know. It's outrageous. So the corporatocracy is like cleaning up big time. It's like they've never been more profitable. And especially in the last year with this plague, like I mentioned on several videos, the testing industry that's popped up around this alone has been estimated to be a $91 billion a year industry. Yesterday, I heard some really strange news. And and like I say, whenever you hear something, whether it's from me or anybody else, investigate it and don't just look once or twice. Try to find numerous sources for confirmation. But that two of the vaccines were claiming that they might only last for 6 months. I mean, I don't know if that's true or false, but I did hear it from two sources. Like I say, sometimes if I'm really, that's why I'm saying take that with a grain of salt, because I'm not going to say that I know that to be fact, because I usually like to go to about 7 sources. But I just heard that last night, and I wasn't even going to say that today, but just came on my mind when I thought about this $91 billion industry that's grown up just out of testing people, which seems somewhat bizarre to me and shows that this thing's not going to end. And these mixed signals we get about, well, if you get the shot, you still got to wear a face mask or something like that. And then these other states, and then you got the states like Texas where, they opened up a month ago, but their overall numbers, like, of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths, went from the time they opened up, decreased, just went down. And it just, people make excuses and they won't cover it. Well, it's going to get. And that's where things get scary. And that's where I say, and, you could say this is the woo-woo thing or something like that. I need some ice cubes. I have a classic. I might change the background of my set. I have the classic ice, whatever you call it, the bar ice thing. And I need to have that here because what I need here is 2 ice cubes, but I don't want to walk into the kitchen and leave you hanging for, 60 seconds while I go get a couple ice cubes. But my soda's getting warm. It's like when you have cold coffee. It's just like. But yeah, that I don't know about this whole thing. And my biggest fear is that when I see an industry growing around something, then my mind, having had the life experiences that I have had, such as, the time I spent in Capitol Hill and around the world, that I really worry about, I'm worried about the concept I touched on yesterday about, the possibility of a bioweapon idea. It's just like when I said about, they could have destroyed those poppy fields in Afghanistan anytime over the last 20 years, 20 years. But they didn't. In fact, I talked to people that they were being protected. And so that's the real danger of the corporatocracy, is that people that live in a world that's so detached from ours, and I'm not going to get off on some weird thing, right? So don't take me the wrong way. This is just a brief little thought, But there are people in this world, and this isn't the way my show usually goes. So don't get the wrong impression if this is the first time you've seen this. But every now and then I will touch on something like this. Is that once you're talking in the trillions of dollars and you're dealing with megalomaniacs, all right, that human life to them has no value whatsoever. Okay. Trillions of dollars, megalomania. Think about it. And the type of people. All right. that are that type of person, individual, narcissistic sociopath, right? Megalomania, mega billionaire, corporatocracy, trillions of dollars. And then you take some, and what is human life to them? They don't care, right? If they could create $100 billion industry here and $1 trillion industry, say for the thing in the arm, well, why not, release something or do something or mess with something to keep that flow revenue stream coming in, right? Why drop, the Moab on poppy fields when you could be selling, when you could have this $100 billion or $1 trillion industry? And who cares that all these people die of overdoses and are addicted to heroin and fentanyl and all these things? There are people that are really like that. That's the narcissistic sociopath or the narcissistic psychopath. It's megalomania. And people who are into this power and greed, that's part of that culture. It's not all, there are cool people, I mean, I've known many in my travels, and people I've worked with, worked for. Of course, in those days, being a multi-millionaire was a big deal. So I've known many multi-millionaires. But, nowadays it's the multi-billionaire is the same as like I said, the Forbes 500 type of thing. It's like the stock market. It's hard to believe, but in the 90s, just the 90s, 25 years ago, the stock market was only around 5,000 or something like that. We talked about Bitcoin, how that's like, how everything just jumps. And somewhere along the line, hyperinflation is going to set in because the price of things are going up. So that's a concern too. But my biggest concern is that I think that when I talked earlier about such a circle around to everything, I won't leave you hanging. These dozen or so issues that, that human life isn't that complicated. And that the issues affecting us and this planet, like the real issues, not the manufactured ones, not the fear-mongering ones, this stuff.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Man, I wish they would play that, on television, like with the black and white picture of Roosevelt saying that, every day. I had another thing I forgot to bring down. I was like, I had a weird night of sleep. I woke up around midnight. And I just like between midnight and 4, I was down, I got up at 4. By the way, I didn't do my weekend weather thing and stuff like that for those of you people who might want that. It is a staple of my show. So let's do that.
Weekend weather.
I mean, even though there's only one day left, it's currently 57 degrees here in the mid-Atlantic states of the former United States. And it's raining. And there's a 100% chance of rain today on this Sunday, April 11th in the year 2021. High temperature is going to be 66 here, the overnight 48. And this week, it's looking like it's just going to get progressively colder where I live. And I have a sneaky feeling. I talked to someone in Florida and someone out towards the west, and it seems like it's kind of like that sitting on the dock of the bay. Seems like it's raining all over the world Seems like it's going to be raining all over the U.S., at least in most parts. I'm personally concerned about the colder weather because I have crops out there in the back. Crops, or I should say plants. You know, just my personal garden. But I mentioned earlier to people, I have a inexpensive house because I basically, you know, reduced my cost of living greatly. My mortgage, taxes, and insurance are less than $200 a month. I know it's hard to believe, but I have 1.5 baths, 2-bedroom house with a well, it's like a finished off attic, which I believe it's a 100-year-old house. So one time that was a living space, I believe. And a small front room. This would be the living room, which is really kind of small. And so it's my broadcast center. And a larger kitchen. At one time, this was a barber shop, this front room. And a kitchen, which like I say, instead of having an island in it, I put a bar in there because it's a bigger room. So, but I have a leaky roof. I mean, I have a problem with my roof. And I'm scaled down right now to where I'm living intentionally below the poverty line. And there's a number of reasons why I'm doing that. And that ties into this budgetary thing too, which we'll get back to. But by intentionally having my living at that level, it affords me certain things that, that work out, that just, make life easier and less stressful for me. Right. Though at times in my life I've made, a lot of money, but at this point I'm totally scaled down. So it's not in my budget to put like a $12,000 new roof on. And, we recently had, and there's no reason, we recently had these gusts of wind that were like 60 miles per hour. And this roof never was great. And I was like kind of patching it from the inside out, literally, because I couldn't get up there because it's almost 4 stories. This is a thin house, but it's like tall and thin. It's a Dutch colonial. I believe it was purchased from the Sears catalog like over 100 years ago. If you ever want to look up that, that's an interesting thing. People used to buy houses out of the Sears catalog. A truck would come and just deliver everything. Instruction book, nails, wood, roof, windows, the whole thing on a flatbed truck. Imagine that. It's pretty crazy. But last night, and I'm one of these guys, there's nothing more soothing than a rain, like I was always the type of person that just would love to sit on a porch during a summer rain, it's like relaxing, hanging out. But now when I wake up in the middle of the night and I hear rain, I'm thinking roof. So I go out of my bedroom into the hallway and I heard it dripping, a new spot. So I just threw down a towel in that spot. It wasn't like some deluge, but it was like a drip. So after the show, I have to go up into the attic and see where this new leak is and how bad it is. And if it's another one that I could like put some kind of sealant inside. I keep postponing and pushing this back because I just don't have the outlay, of 12 grand to have because these are the prices they're charging. Who knows? And that was what I heard several years ago. So who knows? It's probably gone up to 15 now. Hyperinflation. So that rain forecast, for that
weekend weather
was not exactly, You know, it wasn't exactly a soothing thing to hear that, you know, gentle rain. And today's 100% chance of rain. It's just my life, you know. It's you know, normally this would be a beautiful thing, just listening to that rain. Hey, you got to have a sense of humor, Matt.
I am your main connection to the switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. Hey, look, I'm going to get an ice cube. All right. This show. So I will give you a little blast from the past, and I'll be right back.
Schaefer is the one beer to have when you're having more than one. Schaefer pleasure doesn't fade even when your thirst is done. The most rewarding flavor in this man's world of people who are having fun. Schaefer is the one beer to have when you're having more than one. Oh, yes, Schaefer is the one beer to have when you're having more than one.
Schaefer, the one beer to have when you're having more than one.
They don't make commercials like that anymore, do they? You know, the jingle. Yeah. Anyway, so thanks for putting up with that little quick ice cube break. I appreciate it. Warm soda doesn't work. So these people are out there talking about the budget. And they won't vote for this, or they won't vote for that because there's not enough budget. My chair. If you think the roof is bad, my office chair is even worse. But you scale down, you live, and you try to be happy, and you deal with it. It's not that bad. Keep a positive attitude about life. But when they're making money, literally, or creating money out of thin air and just in the cloud, the budget doesn't really matter. What bothers me is where it goes and how it feeds this behemoth that I call the corporatocracy, and how the corporatocracy is systematically taking over every bit of what once was government and elected officials. And that those elected officials we were hoping, people who voted, that those elected officials would appoint people to do the people's business. And that when people paid taxes, that tax money, would go to the things that the person that you voted for, campaigned on, and that you believed in, and you thought that, that needed to be done. So it's almost as if they're talking about raising corporate the tax rate by what, 7% or something like that. In my mind, I don't know why they just don't abolish the federal income tax completely. When you have the Federal Reserve creating money ledgers in the sky, and then just look, everyone's seen that national debt thing. Let's see. I'm just going to do this quick because I haven't done that in a while. Google search national debt clock. in real time. U.S. national debt is at $28 trillion, right? U.S. federal spending, official, and that's $6 trillion, I believe. U.S. federal budget deficit, $3 trillion. U.S. federal spending actual, $8 trillion. U.S. federal tax revenues only $3 trillion. So U.S. official spending is $6.7 trillion, but U.S. federal tax revenues only $3.4 trillion. Income tax revenue is $1.6 trillion. So, I wish I wish someone, would create an interface here where I could have just put, had that thing appear here. But like I said, there is third-party software that lets you do that, but I'm not about to get into producing these things because it takes like 4 to 6 hours, between on a 2-hour video, between creating it, then editing it, putting these various things in, downloading that file to an MP4, right? And then that takes like an hour sometimes. And I've got a fairly fast processing computer. And then uploading it to YouTube could take 2 hours. So like the whole process, your whole day is, and you can't really do anything while that's happening because, you'll just gum up the works of your computer. So, so it's like, okay. I've done it, and I have many produced videos up there, and you can watch them. If you go back, you have to go back 2 months because I've been doing these nonstop for, like I said, almost 60 days straight. But as you can, if you, listen to those figures, federal income tax is a mere pittance. So how's this country running? Right? It's like funny money, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, the Federal Reserve is just, see, in other words, they called it too big to fail back in the 2008 crisis, right? When they bailed out these institutions. They said, well, it's too big to fail. And people got, the same budget conscious people got crazy about that too. But what I'm trying to say is that that was 12, 13 years ago. And here we are. And now we're spending, now they're passing a $2 trillion bill and talking about maybe another several $1 trillion this year. And yet the tax revenue isn't that high. And even if they raise the corporate tax rate, that never worked. That's not going to even approach the amount of money, the spending amount. See, there's no way. The national debt is so high and we're adding to it so much that there's no way to ever balance the budget. It's beyond, it's like it's the tipping point. We're beyond the tipping point. Okay. We're in uncharted territory. Let's put it that way. And so these financiers, and these are brilliant people, working for this in the central banks. Janet Yellen is a very, very intelligent woman. Okay. The people who work for the Federal Reserve, they're at the top of their game. All right. So, they know what they're doing. And they've got this all, they're not in panic mode at all. You know, they go to work every day. They've come home to their families, you know, celebrate the holidays. You know, they're, you know, they meet and they've got a strategy. They know those numbers, you know, better than we do. Right. So they, you know, and that's part of this whole idea of them trying to institute, you know, get involved in like the blockchain technology and things of that nature. Because remember, one Bitcoin's worth $60,000 right now. And if you would have bought a Bitcoin when it cost, you know, even when they cost a few $1,000s or even like $5,000 or even $10,000, you would have made $50,000 profit. But what is Bitcoin? I mean, in the early days, I was playing around with mining, you know, doing that. That's how that thing works. And what it is you're running your computer's processing, trying to basically solve an equation type of thing. And that's what the mining's about. And then, of course, countries like China and stuff like that, where the state got involved, you know, they put massive resources into, you know, with these high supercomputers to basically solve, you know, to do this mining, solving this equation, so to speak. And when you solved it, you earned a Bitcoin for doing it. So in effect, you know, and there's Litecoin, there's this coin, that coin, whatever. You know, did you ever watch that show on RT, Max and Stacy? You know, Max. You know, he predicted all this stuff. You know, I think he even had his own coin. I don't know what he, you know, but I'm assuming he held on to his stuff. He must be, if it's at the 60,000 now, if he held on to his Bitcoin, that guy must be worth a fortune. So these guys at the Fed, you know, the central bankers, the financiers, the big Wall Street people, the movers and shakers, the Davos set, World Economic Forum. Think about that. World Economic Forum. You know, the Great Reset is about economics. Well, that's why I call it a corporatocracy. It's a business. You know. And so the idea behind that is that you can never balance the budget. You can never repay the debt. There simply isn't enough money and goods that's ever going to, you know, come together. And the tax revenue that you're bringing in is a fraction, is a small fraction. So, you know, my idea, you know, to the balanced budget people is I say, look, accept the fact that Western civilization has fallen. I mean, it's not coming back. Like I say, does anyone know? I was talking to somebody yesterday. I said, do you know the date that the Roman Empire failed, the date that Greece ceased to be, you know, Greece, you know, ancient Greece, the exact day Egypt, the dynastic Egypt period, you know, ended, when the day the Mayans, you know, no. I mean, there's historians that can say, well, this and that, this particular thing led to this, and around circa, you know, the word circa, such and such, or at this, you know. But no, it's while the empires, the great empires from the past were falling, you know, the people didn't know it. I mean, there were probably people like me, right? But you know what? You know, standing on a stone, talking to people. It's like the old soapboxes, right? They still do that in Britain, right? Some places. Guy stands up and, you know. But no, you can't. You know, you don't know it. And it just happens. It's a process. And that's what's happening here. You know, it happened to Western civilization over the past couple decades. You know, it just was basically collapsing. You know, it sped up more and more, but it's gone. Western civilization as we've known it is just no longer exists. And the U.S. empire, you know, is fallen, and it's being taken over by a corporatocracy because they have financial interests. You know, and that's why I say it's almost like an organized crime syndicate. You know, and you've got megalomaniacs, you know, and, you know, these power, greed, Davos set, many of which are narcissistic sociopaths. Human life to them is meaningless. Soldiers are just cannon fodder or pawns, you know, to be sent out. In many cases, these wars, they weren't so much even wars for oil. They were wars to deplete the equipment so that equipment could be repurchased by the military industrial complex. So that, you know, the idea is that if you're not fighting and you're not using, you know, losing Humvees, you know, shooting missiles, you know, dropping bombs, you know, having to replace aircraft and all of this sort. It's like the word human resources. And that's kind of what the military is to the war profiteers. They're just human resources. I mean, that's like the worst thing in the world. The idea that people accept that companies have a human resources department. I mean, that's like basically saying, okay, here's our human resources. Here's our copy machines, right? You know, you're nothing more. Like I say, you know, the classic. I mean, let's do it. Come on. It's part of the show. You're nothing more than cattle on what used to be their tax farm, but it's like a consumer farm. You know, you serve a value, a purpose, but when you're no longer serve a purpose, you're put out to pasture. Like I said, what happens when the farmer leaves the field? People don't think about this stuff. But yeah, they could end the federal tax system tomorrow because it's such a small percent of the, you know, of the debt that's ever rising that it's meaningless. And like I was trying to get back with Bitcoin and these other coins, there's a whole bunch of coins, you know, there's dozens of them. I kicked myself because when they first came out with like Litecoin and some of these other ones, you know, those things cost nothing. They were in the dollars. But I was like, the heck with that. I'm not going to get into it. I mean, I did, like I said, I played around with mining for a little while. But then I lost interest and I figured, you know. But yeah, I probably would be sitting on, you know, I would probably have a new roof right now. Easy. But there's no, you know, if you just drop the federal income tax altogether, you know, and just let the Federal Reserve and the corporatocracy and the Wall Street and Davos set, and the World Economic Forum folks just play their games, because Bitcoin is not based on anything. It's a fiat. It's like anything else. It's a fiat currency. You know, I mean, it's nothing. It's a number in the cloud. right? It's like, in other words, if you were fortunate enough to have one Bitcoin right now, you have $60,000. You know, that's like going to Vegas or a casino. It's like you have to wonder. I think if I had one, I'd cash it in right now and take the 60. That's not to say that who knows, it could keep going up. But when I saw that number, I'm going like, because I wasn't paying attention to it for the past year or so or longer. But it's like, yeah, take the money and, So that's the idea. That's this idea of this high finance world of the corporatocracy. They just figure it doesn't really matter. They say it's money, like I said, in the bizarre type of idea. And after the war in Iraq, people were trading these bills that had a guy who, a top from a toppled government, but they thought, well, money is money, right? Perception is reality. And these guys know that. And that's one of those things. That's one of those human nature things that we've been conditioned to accept. And the people that keep talking about balanced budget. See, some people might think, oh, so you're pro, this government spending and this waste and all this stuff. And it's like, no, I'm against this because I know it's misuse and it's misdirected. And it's ultimately doing more damage than good. It's like I explained about the infrastructure lie, right? You can't fix the infrastructure, without using heavy equipment. And I don't know if I took some more pictures or not. Well, by the way, that's kale in my backyard garden. But I think I did show this the other day. And that's yeah. But it bears showing it again. That's heavy equipment. That's how you fix infrastructure. You use these giant, machines, dump trucks, bulldozers, cranes, all that kind of stuff. And like I said many times, my chair fell down again. Fire trucks, emergency vehicles, ambulances, and stuff like that. Not all these things, they don't run on batteries. Okay. You don't fix a bridge without heavy equipment that requires carbon-based fuels. So you talk about, so when I see them say, okay, we're going to have this infrastructure project and we're going to spend such and such and do this. And then at the same time, they're closing pipelines and stuff down. I'm going, you're a hypocrite. Because the U.S., I had nothing to do with the change of color. That's just the camera. It will readjust itself. What happened is we'll be an oil importer within 6 to 18 months if this, infrastructure bill goes through. And that inevitably means that, more Middle Eastern wars, or we go after Venezuela maybe to grab their oil or something. Or will the price of oil just rise because, and it'll cost, we'll be back to that. Remember how we pushed, it was like pushing close to $4 a gallon in gas, and all these people who have these giant SUVs now. And then, of course, what everyone forgets is that transportation, we have this on-demand type of inventory on demand, or whatever they call it. Just in time, I think, is another expression they use. So that at any given time, a grocery store or a box store, they're constantly getting their materials trucked in to them, on a regular basis, at least weekly, in some cases with supermarkets on a, maybe twice a week. And so as the cost of fuel goes up, the prices of food and everything else, like currently right now, even with lumber, a 2x4, I had a video I made that kind of showed how I built my little mini greenhouse. That's like not much bigger than like twice the size of, say, a phone booth. But it's enough to put in, plant starts out in my small yard. And I said how to build, the video was like how to build a mini greenhouse for like $50. And the idea is like I had some 20-some 2x4s and stuff like that. Well, the price of a 2x4 back then was like $1.88 or something. And now people are paying anywhere from $8, $10, even more, for a 2x4. So if just going with a $10 thing, 20 2x4s would cost $200 in some places in this country right now. So forget about a $50 greenhouse. The 2x4s alone would have been $200. Excuse me. So if the price of transportation price of gas goes up, price of fuel goes up, excuse me, energy. Excuse me again. I'm sorry. It's early in the morning and I've been talking for an hour and a half. It's supply and demand. It's common sense. And you can't run heavy equipment and 18-wheelers on long hauls on batteries. And even if you put in high-speed rail lines that ran somehow were the tracks, or you had, going into the cities, electrified, the energy company itself has to supply that electric. That electric has to be produced, and to produce that high a volume, of energy to power these giant locomotives hauling, See, I see trains. There's a train that goes right through. When I walk to the grocery store, there's a bridge that I have to go under. And it's and there's trains there like every day. And I can hear them at night even. And when I'm walking down there in the morning and I see these trains, the various cars all have logos and stuff on them. And so you can see it's everything from, things going to box stores, to, various goods and fuels and, everything. So we're already maxed out, I mean, you drive on the road, you see how many 18-wheelers there are. Like I say, I've got a construction project going on right here where they're fixing redoing the entire sewer system in the city or something. Because I think a couple of years ago the contractor screwed up or something. And then they surcharged us all $55 a month to all of our bills, and they never took it back. And so, that kind of stuff, we could be facing hyperinflation. So there's a hypocrisy there. And yet people would look at it and go, oh, great, they're going to fix the infrastructure. And who isn't for that? Yeah, roads are in bad condition, bridges are failing, all that kind of stuff. But don't say you're going to do the Green New Deal and get rid of carbon-based fuels at the same time, when the fact is, in order to implement that deal, right, to rebuild the infrastructure and fix these key bridges first and not blah, 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 it's going to require heavy equipment that relies on carbon-based fuels, which means we're going to have to increase our usage of carbon-based fuels in order for that policy to be implemented. And no, I to this date, I'm the only one that I believe has mentioned this from a practical standpoint, and who's like demonstrated that. You know, I haven't heard anyone in even in like New York or any of these people talk about the idea that fire trucks don't run on batteries. So, you know, that's the disconnect that we have. And so let the corporatocracy, in other words, you know, we're in uncharted territories. So, you know, let the corporatocracy and the central bankers finance their, you know, their megalomania. And just, that's one of the reasons why I've like cut myself down to like limited my exposure to the corporatocracy as best as possible, as much as possible, because I don't want to get caught up in that hyperinflation, crazy world that we're heading into. And it's not going to be solved by an election, you know, so people who have a cult personality around it, some kind of messianic character who's going to come along and suddenly balance budgets and change this and change that. You know, the national debt is just too high and it's growing too much. There's simply not enough, as they say on the street, cash money to pay that off. And those who are, you know, pushing, well, let's raise the corporate taxes to, you know, and they're just saying that to soothe, it's just language to soothe people, the budget people, you know, or just, you know, the critics. But they have no idea of how far away, you know, that tax increase isn't going to make a difference. In fact, it's going to hurt things, because what happens, the same thing that's happened before. You raise corporate taxes, corporations will move to a place with lower taxes. You know, remember you know, that's why I call it like an organized crime syndicate. But just in general, a corporation has no morals, no ethics. It has a sole purpose. You know, I've had a corporation in the past. You know, the corporation exists for the purpose of making a profit for its shareholders. I mean, that's what it exists for, right? A corporation exists to make money. Even a 501c3, you know, so-called non-profit corporation is still has its purpose is to generate revenue. You know, so it could, you know, do its things. And people don't get that. Like they, you know, because most people, you know, and it's not their fault, but they don't understand basic economics. They don't understand, let alone global economics, or what the new world order, the old world order, I should say, what the World Economic Forum is all about. They don't know what goes on at Davos. The people aren't watching Bloomberg and CNBC. They're watching Fox and CNN and MSNBC, right? Or ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, that type of stuff. They're watching, you know, the political media circus, car salesmen, you know, people, fear mongers, that goofy, been news junkies, right? They live in such, you know, anytime I get exposure to something like that, it's like the things that go on there. It is a surrealistic nightmare. right? Or like I said yesterday, it's theater of the absurd. I watched something yesterday. Well, Bill Gates is, again, this guy, and he just gets a free pass, is like seriously pushing, and I believe they're in the testing phase, where he wants they want to dim the sun by putting particulate matters into the upper atmosphere to reflect the sun. And their rationale is they're using the same concept of like a super volcano's eruption. Now, why would he want to dim the sun when there's been an uptick in volcanic eruptions, and we're experiencing grand solar minimum? See, people don't understand that. The Earth is actually cooling. We may see crop shortages in the coming year because of the weather. It has nothing to do with global warming. We've been cooling, and we're heading in that direction. So what's this guy? Why is this guy getting a free pass? And why are they up there even messing around with this? They call it geoengineering. And like MIT, these are like serious people involved in it, in this effort. What right does he have to change the world, right? Alter the planet. Well, he's made many speeches about depopulation. He thinks there's too many people. So they want to dim the sun. Well, that means we're going to have less crops. When you have less crops, that means more starvation. Yeah, that's a good way to depopulate. I guess, 1 billion people will die, 2 billion people. I don't know. Imagine the mayhem that'll cause. The wars, the civil wars and stuff, food wars. They say people are 6 meals away from basically losing their minds and basically, abandoning all rationality for food, which means they'll basically be climbing through your window to see if you got food in your refrigerator or in your cupboards if they go six meals without food. It's like they talked about people being one paycheck away from, losing their house, not being able to pay for their apartment or whatever. Those are 21st century realities. That's not fantasy. And there's just so much money out there and so many people now, like I talked about. In the 70s, there were 200 million people. Now there are 320 million. So the corporatocracy doesn't care because they can sell enough of their product either way because there's been an increase in the population. So they don't care if 100 million people are suffering. Because again, a corporation is not a religious organization. It's a business. It's a business that's purpose is to, increase the value of their stock, reward their shareholders to make a profit quarter over quarter, year over year. That's the purpose. And so the world's become a giant corporatocracy. The U.S. is a corporatocracy. It's a collection of corporatocracies. And I tell you, they're run like organized crime syndicates. Human life means nothing to these megalomaniacs. And that's not to say that there aren't good people involved. When I say there's, read that thing out and there's 9 million people working for the federal government alone, which is basically pretty much run by the corporatocracy, that doesn't mean that those 9 million various bureaucrats, soldiers and mailmen and mail women, that they're like some kind of evil people. They're not. They're just people with jobs trying to make a living, feed themselves and their family and friends or whatever. They just want to pursue happiness, so to speak, like everyone else. But that doesn't mean that the corporatocracy at the top, who's paying their salaries, aren't like run like organized crime syndicates and are have no concern for human life. And it's the same with the media. The media isn't, the media has no moral, they're corporations. Put it, for example, it's like the FDA. The FDA has the worst. I've said this and I'll say it again. I'm going to constantly say it. The FDA has the worst track record of any agency probably in the history of the world. Okay? Think about it. Food and Drug Administration. And you say, well, what are you talking? That's ridiculous. Well, no, it's not. Turn on your TV. They constantly approve drugs. Okay? And you see the ads for the drug on TV. If you got a skin rash, take this thing. Right? And then next year, you see the thing from the law firm. If you took this drug for skin rash or blah, 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 you were a family member and you died, had organ failure, or experienced such and such, please contact the law firm of such and such and such and such. You are eligible for a cash settlement. It's all over TV. You can't turn off. Flip around the channels. You're going to see one of those law ads about things that the FDA approved. And yet you'll see ads for new drugs. Right? So not only did the FDA and they're all protected, that they pass these little things in Congress, so they protect everybody. It's like they protect the social media platforms, right? That's what that section 230 or whatever it is, right? They give them like carte blanche, right? Well, the FDA has basically approved a drug that's killed people, okay, and drugs over the past decades, right? How many drugs that have killed how many, people, or maimed or caused all kinds of weird stuff. What, hundreds of thousands, millions of people died? The media has advertised these drugs, made a profit from advertising those drugs. All right. Not held accountable. And now the media is profiting from the ads from the law firms who are basically telling me, that the FDA approved drug that was advertised on that station, now they're collecting and making a profit from the law firm ad that's telling you that drug should have never been approved in the first place. That drug, that should have never been advertised in the first place. It's killed people, and now blah, blah, blah. So who makes money? The corporatocracy. They profit. There's a certain weed killer out there right now that you can go to a box store or a hardware store and buy. That there are active there are actual class action suits and lawsuits basically that have proven in court that these things have caused cancer and killed people, given people cancer. You could still buy those things. Now, what's that all about? There are foods, heart disease is like one of the number one killers next to cancer. All right. There are foods that, approved by the FDA that are basically artery clogging, heart, basically a recipe for having heart problems or diabetes, right? Or perhaps even cancer. Cancer kills more every year than this plague has. And yet it's one of the most highly profitable businesses out there. See, that's what scares me. See, when I see that the testing industry is becoming a $90 billion industry, and that the shot industry is probably in the hundreds of $billion industry, I start worrying not so much about the thing, because the thing should be over by now, by all laws of nature, like by the natural progression of things, right? What we know from previous, things of this kind. So I worry about them seeing this as such a profitable venture that there might be something going on there, beyond the natural. Okay. Remember, they're in business to make a profit, and they've proven they sell these items that cause deaths, organ failure, and all sorts of serious diseases. And no one ever, and then like these lawsuits and these settlements are just like a slap on the wrist. I mean, one big company recently with the, whatever that powder thing settlement that they were doing for years. Well, they're I'm not going to mention a specific name. You know exactly who I'm talking about. Well, they were selling that for 60 years or more. And, and they recently lost the lawsuit, and there's a big, there's people are getting settlement money for that because it caused, cancer and things like that. Like I say, without naming names, that same company is still profitable, still has products on the market, and is one of the people who has one of those shot things coming out. But they were recently, busted for lying and putting out this product that they knew, caused this thing. And there's there's commercials on TV right now from law firms where you call in and, if you got such and such from it, you get your settlement from it. It's proven in court, right? Court of law. All right. This isn't me talking. So that's the scary part. So, you've got this corporatocracy pulling the strings of all these politicians, the marionettes, the media, all this stuff. Everything is wrong, Didn't even get into that much today. Everything is wrong. My great solar stuff, all that stuff. My book Codex back there, which is my latest book. And it's like, I've been dealing with this, and these are the kind of stuff I talk about every day. It's a free flow of consciousness, But you've got to get yourself, more aware. Thanks for watching, by the way. Whenever you watch this. But you got to get yourself more aware of these kinds of things. And that's one of the reasons why I've scaled down. And I don't make any money on this. Like I said, I'm not monetized on YouTube. I'm, kind of started a community at Locals. We'll see if, what happens with that. I like the concept. It seems like an interesting venture. But to tell you the truth, I'm not looking to, I don't really care so much about monetizing there either. It's just another avenue to get the message out to people. I'm just sharing my information, It's this whole thing, service to others. Some people might think that's like corny or something like that. But it's like, I'm aware of these things. I write these books. I've done these beat poetry songs. I test out this, this solar equipment and various devices that could help you through storm damage and, power outages and stuff like that. And I have these shirts. Everything is wrong. Game over. You don't know what you don't know. What, then what? Just ideas just to get the message out to people, get people thinking. That's my goal. It's what I do. I create this content because a lot of this stuff, people aren't talking about it, or at least they're not, like I call it, jackhammering it into people's heads. It's mentioned in passing. Maybe there's a meme, or maybe somebody posted something, or maybe there's a video clip by some, news reader here or there. but it's just gone with the wind, in one ear, out the other. It's just fleeting, and nobody takes any, looks at it seriously. No one digs down deep and makes that thing about heavy equipment needs carbon-based fuels, and shows the absurdity, the hypocrisy of trying to do a Green New Deal at the same time as you're trying to say you're going to have this World War II type of infrastructure project, right? That's going to require, tremendous amounts of energy. Or the corporatocracy, how big, everybody knows that there's something called big tech and big data, right? They know about big pharma, right? Anyone who doesn't know about the war profiteers and the military contractors, the military industrial complex, you had to be like living under a rock. I mean, the thing about the FDA I just gone through, come on, it's common sense. Nobody talks about it. But why would you believe anything they would say? And yet people say, well, the FDA approved this. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that. They got the worst track record of anybody. I wouldn't trust anything they approve, because it seems most of the things they approve, there's some lawsuit 2 years later about it. And remember, the CDC is a 501c3 corporation. It's not the government. It gets government money, but it gets a lot of foundation money. And remember, foundations are, the foundations that fund a lot of these things are getting that money back on the back end. See, people don't know that. And so, and just to end on this idea, because that goes full circle where I talked about balancing budgets and stuff like that. It's like, we're beyond that point. The numbers are so off the wall, so outrageous, so high that it doesn't matter. I just wish they would fess up and with a bunch of things. Fess up and tell us that this might have been a bioweapon. Fess up and tell us that, the corporatocracy really runs things. I mean, we know that. People who've lived in DC understand what K Street, the idea of lobbyists, I mean, that's the corporatocracies, they know the media is basically, totally controlled by like 5 major corporations. They know the influence that the communist Chinese have had on things, how the America has been bought and sold. They know this, we're living in a disunited states with irreconcilable differences. You can't pretend, there's no Messiah is going to save this. Just like no tax increases are going to even approach the national debt and be able to whittle that down. Right? People know that you can't put batteries in a hook and ladder fire truck that's, sending up pumps and ladders in a skyscraper fire that's lasting for hours, using all that energy. And these ambulances are heavy equipment and cranes. People know that. It's common sense. I showed you pictures of the things. You should stand next to some of this stuff. It's like farming equipment. Yeah, that stuff doesn't run on batteries. These are like major pieces of equipment that bring in harvests. It's the same as like the idea of bringing in immigrants to like migrant workers it's like people living 20, 30 years ago. They have like equipment to do all that stuff. And I didn't even touch on AI and algorithms and robotics that are taking over everything practically. That'll be maybe tomorrow or another show where I'll get into that again. How few jobs there will be And if possibly within 6 months to a year, we're going to see another 20 million people out of work just from robotics. See, these works projects, what people don't understand is heavy equipment and like even heavy farming equipment means less laborers. You may, it's the old classic union thing sometimes, like, these Department of Transportation, it's an old joke in the thing, and they still do it to this point. You see these guys with the fluorescent vests, and they're like, somebody's painting a stripe, for a walkway, and there's 14 guys with striped fluorescent vests just like standing around looking and pointing and stuff, right? I have pictures of that kind of stuff because whenever I see it, I'll photograph it. It's laughable. Yeah, there'll be jobs like that, certain jobs where these people, people that just walk to the side. But the actual work is really just being done by the person inside the heavy equipment. It meant, anyway, I think I got my point across. So,
Good morning.
Good morning. Have a great Sunday. Have a great week ahead. And I'll be here. I'm going to, if you got this and saw this through locals, leave a comment there instead of in YouTube. Let me know that you've watched it, because I'll put a little comment about it on there and have a link to it there. Otherwise, I'll talk to you soon. Take care. All the best. Cheers.